I'm sorry. I did not expect this film to affect me as much as it did, but I think this is the most I have cried in a movie theater. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is a children's TV show that started locally at WQED in Pittsburgh in 1967 and started broadcasting nationally on PBS the next year, but not something I engaged with regularly, if at all, in my childhood. And probably something that my 8-year-old self would have thought they were too cool for school for. Around that age, I did diss on Sesame Street, despite the fact I never saw it or was something I was not the target audience for. So watching this biographical documentary was just eye-opening to me. Just learning how Fred Rogers, a ordained Presbyterian minister, generally cared about child development and is never condescending to them was fascinating. I felt like I learned some very important tidbits about a child's understanding that could and would be useful for me and everyone, especially when I have kids. He absolutely never talks down to them, and felt that these kids should learn about these important life lessons about what's going on in the world, but almost never referring to real-life events, but in a roundabout way, bring the issues to the child's attention that they would understand. I didn't know within the first week of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood's airing nationally, the show tackled the damaging effects of warfare in line with the current events of Vietnam through the puppet characters of Make-Believe Land. Again, within the first week, Fred Rogers was tackling the subject of warfare to his audience of preschoolers because he felt it was important to talk to children in the way that they would understand about the events that are happening around them in the world. And that's just tip of the iceberg. While some have already known how Fred Rogers almost single-handedly saved PBS from losing its federal funding in the late 60s, seeing the archived footage of his testimony to Congress is still awe-inspiring. While one would think it's easy to make a documentary where you just pick a subject, interview a bunch of people, and cut it all together in those interviews and other clips, Morgan Neville still, of course, knows that a documentary filmmaker is telling a story. To add to the film, and to complement the archive interviews and audio of Fred Rogers, there is some nice well-done animation that's just as endearing and adds to the film, much like how Fred Rogers is so endearing himself. Morgan weaves this all together for a path to the audience to follow through this biography, almost like a caring parent holding the hand of the child as we walk through the story, with Morgan being the caring parent and we, the audience members, being the child, much like how Fred Rogers is that parent and his audience is the child when he made Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It's one of those times you don't appreciate someone and all they have done until they are gone. I think that's what made me a blubbering mess in the theater when I was thinking of how amazing and caring and radical Fred Rogers was and how the world could use someone like him right now. Like in 1969, where a hotel manager poured cleaning products and bleach in his pool because black people were swimming in it. On the show, Fred Rogers shared his tiny pool to wash and cool down his feet with the character of Officer Clemens, a black man, and made it just seem like ordinary and the neighborhood thing to do. And yet, when he put himself like that in historical context, you just become enamored by his character. It makes you wonder what Fred Rogers would say about the world as it is right now, and how he would address and communicate that to the children. Or I wonder how Fred Rogers would feel about what some of the children of the world are going through right now. Like those children being separated from their parents at the US-Mexican border, I bet his heart would break. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was a show that was meant to draw you in, comfort you, and telling you you're welcome to come here. This movie does the same by inviting us to learn about this incredible man, and how if you look at it, you can see how brave Fred was in being emotionally vulnerable through his puppets on the show. So many times I was hoping I had some tissues or napkins to wipe away the tear. Halfway through I was like, oh wait, I do have some napkins. Good thing too, because I needed them. And I'll leave the rest of those moments for you to see for yourselves. The only problem I have with Fred Rogers is how he was not too keen to Francis S. Clemens, who played Officer Clemens, being gay. A position he did came around to eventually, but it's still a bit disheartening to hear how he had said to his friend, don't be gay publicly, it's bad for our sponsors. But again, Fred changed his tune on that matter years later. I like how the director also broke the fourth wall for a couple moments of speaking in the interviews that were used to powerful effect as another way of inviting us into the conversation. It was a moving experience watching this film. I'm glad I saw it. This is one of the must-see movies of the year. Absolutely go see it. You'll be glad you did.